Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into the top 5 best laptops that not only excel in gaming but are also perfect for productivity, creativity, and everything in between. First on my list is Lenovo Legion Pro 7i Gen 9. The Lenovo Legion Pro 7i Gen 9 has kicked the Asus ROG Strix Scar 16 off the top spot. Both are high-end 16-inch gaming laptops configurable up to an RTX 4090, but the boosted performance, slicker chassis, and improved design of the Legion Pro makes it the better buy in 2024. Design. There's some kind of magic going on in the Lenovo Legion Pro 7i Gen 9's design. This is a heavy device, weighing in at 2.79 kilograms, more than the Alienware M16R2, Asus ROG Strix Scar 16, and Razer Blade 16, but it doesn't invade your backpack in quite the same way and chunkier model. The front edge is tapered, with only the rear I/O panel and a little of the sides sitting at full width. That gives the illusion of a much more svelte machine than the Scar 16 while still packing the power of a full chunk. Actual build construction is fantastic as well, with an aluminum base and a skinny lid. Despite its minute size, this top panel holds up extremely well, only ever wobbling when being lowered slightly and snapping straight into place when opened with one hand. There's also very little flex to this piece, whereas I would have expected a far bendier experience. You've got all the RGB you can want, with per-key illumination on the full-sized keyboard and a neat strip of LEDs along the front. I personally prefer this more refined effect than the blaring grille of the ROG Strix Scar 16. Features. The main upgrade this year, like many other gaming laptops, comes to the Legion Pro's screen. It's still a 16-inch QHD plus 240Hz panel, but Lenovo has boosted its color handling, pushing the IPS display to cover 100% of the DCI-P3 color gamut as well as the sRGB range already offered by the previous model. In the real world, that means far more definition between your colors, with games popping off the screen and a particularly immersive vividity to both brighter and darker scenes. Not only that, but the keyboard underneath that screen is one of the best I've tested, offering a super springy feel and a tactile, clean response. Your port selection is pretty standard fare, with 2 USB-C options, both offering power delivery and DisplayPort 1.4, one being Thunderbolt 4. However, the 4 USB-A connections on offer are all USB 3.2 Gen 1. That's not going to make much of a difference to the majority of players' peripherals, but if you're using faster, more recent gadgets, you might get a slower transfer rate on paper. Performance. The Lenovo Legion Pro 7i consistently performed better than the ROG Strix Scar 16 across synthetic and in-game benchmarks, posting some frame rates that gave the, admittedly skinnier, RTX 4090 Razer Blade 16 something to think about. This is a particularly well-engineered device, running in 1080p Ultra settings at between 97 frames per second and 195 frames per second, and QHD Ultra taking us to 71 frames per second to 184 frames per second. That puts it at the top of my RTX 4080 comparison pool, sometimes even overtaking far more expensive RTX 4090 configurations. Verdict: the Lenovo Legion Pro 7i can top the performance charts in its price range, depending on the game, and does it all in a chassis that looks and feels more streamlined than that of the Strix Scar 16. It sits in the middle of the price range, but punches well above that position in both performance and quality of life features, and that's a rare beast indeed. Second on my list is Asus TUF A15. The Asus TUF A15 has long been held as a staple among budget gaming laptops, but the latest model has cemented its position as one of the greats. This is a cheaper rig, so you're making some sacrifices to get those latest components in the price tag. However, the performance on offer is fantastic value for money as a result. Design. From the cool gray tones to the metal lid, the Asus TUF A15 looks and feels more premium than it actually is. Yes, the majority of this chassis is plastic, and there are some questionably cringy text stamps on the main body, but it's a slick form factor overall and one that neatly sidesteps the common angular pitfalls of cheaper rigs. The build quality is secure, with a nicely tightened hinge to the main display and only the expected amount of flex in the keyboard area for a gaming laptop of this price. No, it's not quite as slim as the previous Asus TUF-F15 before it, my personal machine for a long time, but it's still a comfortable size, easily backpackable and well below the heavyweights on this list. Features. Like all good budget gaming laptops, the A15 has everything you need, but doesn't pump too much of your cash into any of its main feature areas. Instead, it saves its value for performance. That means you're getting a pretty standard 1080p 144Hz IPS display, in an older 16:9 form factor that did feel a little restrictive in my testing. This screen could have benefited from a few more nits of brightness, but displays its colors with enough contrast and vividity to get by in a more casual context. That still makes it a more immersive panel than you'll find on the HP Victus 16, a similarly priced budget entry. There's also a full-sized keyboard in here, a rarity even in 16 inches these days, and while it's a little softer than I'd like, it still gets the job done. That trackpad isn't going to see you through a workday on the go, though. It's a clunky implementation with unreliable zoning for each click side and a heavy middle section. Performance. I was impressed with the numbers filing out of the A15's benchmarks. It actually scored higher in Time Spy and Firestrike than a similarly spec'd HP Omen Transcend 16, worth about $600 more, and managed to carry me through demanding titles like Returnal and Hitman 3 without once dropping even close to 60 frames per second. Considering you're spending far less than usual and still scoring 3-figure frame rates in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, this is an absolute win. Verdict: if you're going all in on performance, and your budget doesn't stretch to the big dogs in this race, the Asus TUF A15 is a must-see. It's one of the cheapest machines I've tested so far, and I've come away surprised by the performance on offer as well as the form factor and design. You are making some sacrifices to get there, but at this price point they're all worthwhile. Third on my list is Asus ROG Zephyrus G14. The 2024 Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 changed the game again, adding a glorious OLED display and cutting its top-end components from the lineup to achieve a more ultrabook-oriented slimline design. This is a masterpiece for those after the best possible experience at the intersection between power and portability. Design: Asus has done away with its iconic LED matrix lid, and instead opted for a much cleaner, and personally preferable for this reviewer, single diagonal stripe. Alongside a new unibody CNC milled aluminum chassis, MacBook Pro-esque light gray, and slimline base, this is a gaming laptop designed to fit in with high-end ultrabooks. Dropping bigger components like the RTX 4080 and RTX 4090 from its lineup means the G14 is now one of the lightest rigs on the market at just 1.5 kilograms, all while still retaining a particularly durable form factor. Features: I'll have to kick off with that display. Asus partnered with Samsung for this OLED panel, and the results are incredible. Everything leaps off the screen, from simple developer logos on Game Boot to the frenzied colors of Cyberpunk 2077. It's a little slower in the refresh rate department, but in everyday play the incredible color contrast and super vivid effect overall made for an excellent experience. Those specs have taken a slight hit this year. The 8000 series Ryzen 9 processor is a marginal upgrade from 2023's model, and GPUs now start at RTX 4050s and cap out at an RTX 4070. That means the overall output is going to be lower, traded out for a more slimline build. Performance: no, the 2024 Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 isn't going to perform as well as an RTX 4090 model from the previous generation. But with that excellent screen and super slick form factor, it doesn't necessarily need to. The RTX 4070 in my testing device was more than capable of staying at over 100 frames per second at 1080p in most games, and often held that position in QHD Plus as well. Performance here is on par with a similarly spec'd Razer Blade 14, though for a lower price, with a notable improvement further up the resolution scale. Verdict: the Zephyrus G14 is the best 14-inch gaming laptop I've had my hands on so far, and 2024's iteration continues this tradition of pairing performance with outstanding portability. It's not going to reach the frame rate highs of a higher powered device, but with a gorgeous OLED panel and a fantastic form factor, it's going to see much more use in everyday life. Fourth on my list is Razer Blade 16. The 2024 Razer Blade 16 is expensive, probably a little too expensive considering its competition. But it is the best 16-inch gaming laptop I've tested so far, and it packs a serious punch in its extra features as well. Design: you don't need me to tell you what a Razer Blade gaming laptop looks like. These machines have all held the same black CNC milled unibody design for years now, and the 2024 Blade 16 doesn't deviate from the plan. This is still a fantastic build, though, with the rock-solid form factor and slick, subtle aesthetic that has been celebrated in Razer's history. The 16-inch form factor feels good as well. That 16:10 aspect ratio gives you plenty more real estate compared to the Razer Blade 15, but doesn't overload a backpack in the same way as the Razer Blade 18. Yes, this is still a skinny machine, especially compared to chunkier SCAR models from Asus. But it's not quite as thin or light as the Asus ROG Zephyrus G16, so if you're putting portability at the forefront of your purchase, you might want to consider another build. That extra size does work in the Blade 16's favor overall, though. You've got plenty more space to draw just that little extra power out of your components, which can make all the difference when balancing performance. Features: the star of the show is that 240Hz OLED panel. Developed by Samsung, this is the first high-speed OLED I've tested, and it absolutely sings, offering up a super sharp picture in 1600p and balancing incredible contrasts at the same time. This is the best display I've seen on a gaming laptop, and it's well worth checking out in person. That screen upgrade is Razer's answer to a slow year for components. Yes, we've got Intel's new 14th generation i9 chip in all configurations, and RTX 4070, RTX 4090 GPUs, but improvements under the hood are minimal. Similarly, the keyboard and trackpad feel pretty much the same as they always have done, though the sheer size of the latter does get in the way often. T-Check speakers, a FHD webcam, user-upgradable RAM and storage, up to a massive 96GB/8TB, and a surprisingly efficient battery all make this a well-rounded piece of kit for work and play. Performance: the slimmer form factor means that, despite its extra cost, the Razer Blade 16 actually performs pretty much on par with other high-end 16-inch laptops. It does, however, edge away from similarly skinny models in both the game frame rates and industry benchmark tests. The RTX 4090 configuration I tested posted better numbers than the similarly spec'd Asus ROG Zephyrus G16, and even beat the chunkier Lenovo Legion Pro 7i by some margin as well. Verdict: the Razer Blade 16 won't be for everyone, and there are plenty of similarly spec'd 16-inch gaming laptops available for less. However, if you're going for the best in the business, this is the first machine I'd point to. Its display, performance, form factor, and aesthetic all tip the scales in Razer's favor, and the result is a truly fantastic luxury rig. Fifth on my list is Alienware M18. The Alienware M18 goes toe-to-toe with the Asus ROG Strix SCAR 18 in terms of sheer performance, but does so at a considerably lower price. With a range of configuration options, a slick design, and features more geared towards desktop usage, it's the best 18-inch gaming laptop overall in my books. Design: the Alienware M18 had a surprise for me when I first opened the box. Gently sloping the front lip to a thin taper means that the whole design feels more manageable than the more boxy Strix SCAR 18 from Asus. No, this isn't a portable laptop by any means. You're still picking up a massive 410 by 319 by 25 mm footprint and a considerable 4.23 kg weight, but that slicker design makes it look a little less chunky on a desktop. Elsewhere, you've got all the design staples of an Alienware rig. A cool aluminium lid sports an embossed 18 along the top, with the plastic main body holding on to the same gray aesthetic throughout. Of course, there's still a nice RGB light show to take in, with a more subtle approach than Asus. Features: of course, the big player here is that 18-inch screen. Dell has made some interesting decisions with the specs it offers here. There are only two options: QHD plus 165Hz or FHD plus 480Hz. It would have been nice to have a middle option. Both the Razer Blade 18 and Asus ROG Strix Scar 18 have found happy homes in the QHD plus 240Hz region. While motion is still slick, higher frame rate games could stand to benefit a little more from improved handling overall. I also noticed that this display runs less bright than both Razer and Asus's options, and doesn't offer any additional HDR capabilities.
1600p,
However, with an excellent port selection, 1080p webcam built in, and a full-size keyboard, with full-size number pad, this feels like a real desktop PC alternative. Working particularly hard in the M18's favor, though, are the component options. With RTX 4060 configurations on the table at sub-$2000 prices, the Alienware M18 is winning in the value category. That's perfect if you're after big screen entertainment but don't want to splash thousands on graphics cards you won't make the most of. Performance: the Alienware M18 almost bested the Strix Scar 18 in our testing, even beating it in a handful of benchmarking scenarios. There's some incredible performance under the hood here. In fact, the M18 performed better in more demanding titles like Returnal and Total War: Three Kingdoms, and always packed 3-figure frame rates well into the highest graphics settings in native resolution. Verdict: the Alienware M18 does make a few sacrifices, but in doing so it manages to position itself as an incredibly versatile gaming laptop. You can configure it up to the high heavens if you have the budget, or keep things more grounded for big screen gaming under $2,000. That's not something many 18-inchers can claim, and especially not machines that manage to squeeze this amount of power out of their components.